G'day folks, it's Silk here again. I'm back from Oblivion and I am super excited. I am like a kid on his birthday because I have a new toy to play with, and this is it right here. War of Nova launching in a couple of days, May the 8th, May the 9th here down under, and I am very much looking forward to this. I was very fortunate enough to be involved in the early testing of this game back in October and then later in November, December of last year, and I managed to put together a few video clips just to provide feedback to the developers on some ideas I had about the game, and I'm now going to use some clips from those just to share with new players and those who have already been involved in geostrategic wargaming for some time through other games. Give you a few ideas of what you might be in for when you are playing this game, and without further ado we'll get straight into it. For those who haven't played a game like this before, basically what you've got is a player, you land as a player on a map very similar to this on a much larger scale, and you will be essentially joining up with other members of one of 8 factions to vie for the control of a central control point and end up winning the game. That's it really in a nutshell. But how to get there and what are you doing on the way, I will leave for you to experience for yourself. There needs to be something new for everyone. I'm not going to cover everything off, but one thing I do want to go across is the basic user interface screen for controlling the game. You'll move around forces around a map. Your main thing that you're moving is a ship, which comes up here on this side of the screen. You're essentially moving those from tile to tile, taking one of these tiles for the purpose of gaining resources to further improve your base or command center. The more you build that up, the more options you have available for improving your various craft, your officers that are on them, and gaining all sorts of other bonuses as you go along. You then group together and take a control point, such as this one here, in a region of which there could be 30 or 40 regions. And you will then, at some point, probably within the first or second week, start engaging other factions and vie for control of their control points. These are all achieved by going over crossings between various regions, which are also another control point. And essentially that carries on ad infinitum for a season, which is usually around 2 months, whereupon it all resets. You keep the stuff that you've paid for, but you start leveling all your ships and your base up over again and rinse and repeat. The joy of this comes from battling other factions with whom you perhaps are equal, hopefully, and then gain superiority, and if you don't win one season, maybe you'll win the next. So here on this map, tiles here, simple. You as a player, you're in green. Others in your guild or alliance within your faction are in blue, and basically anything red is fair game. There will be a few other colours that pop up as you go along. I won't go into the detail on that. You control everything you do pretty much from this screen. You have your own character up here. We'll go into that shortly. You can open up your command bases and things from here. You have chapters, which is basically your personal achievement throughout the season. You can have a look at your ships, which are essentially your main, if you like, your main fighting unit, so to speak. You may have, if you've been in other games like this, they would have been called a commander or a hero or an officer or something like that. Well, here our prime unit is our ship. For anyone new to the game, I would strongly suggest going through and checking out the chapters and play by the chapters as they're denoted down here at the bottom right of the screen. That will teach you really how to play the game as you go along. I wouldn't advise kind of skipping past them. If there's any information available, then do follow the various tutorials that are around. You have a number of items here: chapters, battle pass and achievements. These chapters were on chapter 20 here from the early test. You'll go through from number 1, which is essentially how to kit out one of your ships with some strike craft, which essentially are basically hit points almost, although they do have some offensive nature. But you can imagine adding troops to an army that was led by a commander in other similar games. You're along the same lines there. So we'll just quickly zip through and we'll go through. We've seen the chapters here. Now we get on to the battle pass. There's a free one, there's one you can pay for. Obviously they're going to make some money from somewhere. And then we've got achievements, which generally as your new journey as you go along. This is fairly important to actually read what's going on here as you go, so that you can get an idea for what you're building and why you're building it. Now, just to give you an idea of the scale of the game, we'll go on to here. We can zoom out on this map here, and we'll have a quick look at roughly what is going on, and you will see from there that you can gain a grip of what's around you. I've got Jacob over here on one side of the map, and you will see him come up a few times. I'll thank him once more for his input and allowing me to use his name in here. We'll have a few battle reports of him a bit later on for you to have a quick look through. So big heads up there. This is all about community, this game, and most of the people that I've met so far have been absolutely amazing. Everyone's really kind of, you know, zapped about this. They're really into this, and it's a fantastic thing to see. At this point, I would just point out that one of the great things about the game is that it's actually coming out on a Web3 platform as opposed to the older style Web 2. So there will be at some point perhaps some crypto involved in this. There's certainly a chance to win arcade tokens and to gain yourself some NFTs. I'm not entirely sure whether or not they can be traded at a later date, but I'm finding it quite interesting learning as I go. I don't claim to be to have any real knowledge of how that all works, but I think we'll work that out as we go along. The great thing that I'm thinking here is that there's this huge market of people who are really looking for a decent Web3 game, and this may well be it. I'm certainly hoping so myself. So now let's go on and we'll have a look at what our base is like, what the infrastructure is like, and we'll have a quick run through that. As you can see here in the picture up here, we've got a number of different things. We've got infrastructure, a command center, we've got our strike craft, battle groups, repair bay. For now, I'm not going to go into too much on that. We'll have a quick look at perhaps the top two of those, and then we'll take that from there. So first up, we'll go into infrastructure. Essentially, this is your basic buildings. You've got a command center that kind of dictates pretty much the maximum level of a number of the other items in there you can get. The main one you're interested in here is your hangar, your fabrication facility, repair bay, and storage. Storage tells you how much you can store, obviously, in the 4 types of resources, and pretty much they're used to build everything else, be it buildings, ships, strike craft, and so on. So the actual building itself doesn't do a great deal. It gives you a few little bonuses. The main thing with that is just get it up as soon as you can. That's one of your most important buildings that you've got. The other thing I should mention is that where possible, don't worry too much about throwing too much into these resource centers here, simply because those are not going to provide you most of your resource. That will come from the tiles that you take and own during the game. Next screen we'll have a quick look at is the various squads down the side here. And you'll see from here that you can start building up various strike craft. As I mentioned earlier, these are essentially the troops that you put on board your main ships. When you go into a battle, if you lose all your strike craft, essentially you've just been defeated. If you've got some remaining, you've either got a draw or a win. You can't function without these, and managing the fabrication of them and the repair of them when they're damaged is an essential part of the game. So the very next thing we need to look at is going to be our actual abilities that we've got. These were accessed via the character avatar at the top of the screen, and many players who have played similar games will be kind of very familiar with this sort of layout. If you played Lord of the Rings Rise to War, this would be your ring abilities. If you played other similar games, it will be policies. essentially it's a all come from the same template. It's a fairly standard layout. The one thing that I would suggest you seriously go for in these in this tree and try to get up as much as you can and as soon as you can is something called I believe it's called integrated fuel tanks, and these are essential. What this does is it increases the fuel limit of all the ships that you have. Now, when you're playing this game, everything you do costs fuel. In other games, it's stamina, perhaps, and I can't think of anything else where it wasn't stamina. But your fuel level dictates how many moves you can do with a particular ship. You start, I believe, with 120 in your fuel, and just to make a move somewhere would cost you 10 fuel. To take a tile would cost you 20 fuel. To enter into a battle with another player, another 20 fuel. To siege a control point, another 20 fuel. That runs down fairly quickly. So of all the operations tech that you've got available to you, this is the single most important one to get. Now, you will have to wait until you have leveled up your main character to a decent level to access this, but once you get there, pump everything into it. That gives you an extra move and a half, and that fuel only comes back at a relatively slow rate. It's one of the things that sort of limits the game from being completely overtaken by people who are spending tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, and that's the great leveler. You can only move so many times with a particular ship, and that's a restrictor, if you like, and a balancer. Of course, there's going to be other parts of the game where you can actually pay money to improve the strength of those ships or the officers that man them. But this thing helps level it out. If you're up against someone who is significantly more powerful than you, you can play them, if you like, take them on a bit of a race somewhere, and essentially you tile block them. You move away from them when they come to attack you, and fairly soon they've run out of fuel and there's nothing more they can do. Now, if you can conserve your fuel better than someone else, you're on to a winner. So let's take a quick look at our ships. What we've got here is a selection of ships from the early test. These are the ones that were available to us. You'll usually have 4 or 5 of these to within probably a few hours of playing the game, especially if you've bought a little bit of a pack that enables you to have 1 or 2 extra. You'll be wanting to manage those ships early on in the game. You will pick 1 or 2 that you would like to focus on based on the various tech that those ships have got. We'll have a look at that in a minute. You'll be looking to focus on leveling up 1 or 2 main ships who perhaps have a decent defense or a means of minimizing the damage to your strike craft on that ship. You'll be wanting to save those for taking the slightly harder and higher level tiles, resource tiles on the board, because when you take those tiles you gain experience for those particular ships, which means they can level up a little bit faster and take higher level tiles, whereas you'll be picking a separate couple of ships to essentially tile to the tiles that you want to hit with your chosen ships. There is no point in sending your preferred ship for leveling against a very low level tile and wasting 20 fuel on that when you could have been doing it with a different ship. Just going through these now, we'll just zoom in on one of those in particular. We've got a number of stats that are available to us to look at. We've got our leadership, we've got its overall power and its elemental power. Both of those are 2 different types of damage, essentially. We've got its initiative, who goes first. That is incredibly important to have a high initiative if you can when you're going into battle, especially against other players, and this is very much a player versus player game, because that means that you're going to go first. Sorry, I'm looking at command points here. That will affect the number of strike craft. I, for the life of me, can't remember the leadership stats, so happy days, you're going to find that out as we go along. In this ship we can man it with officers, so that is your equivalent in other games of probably equipment that you might normally have put on a commander or a hero. These will undoubtedly come in different flavors and different colors, They will all do different things. The main thing is put all your best officers on your best ship at the beginning, and that way you improve your chances of hitting a decent level tile, gaining more experience for the ship. And as we go on, we'll sort of see that bonus of doing that will be in improving the ship's sort of skills and abilities. We'll have a look at those in a sec. The other most important part of this equation is actually improving the ship's build itself. You do this with schematics. This is where generally a developer will make their money, because you'll be getting those from, if you like, various loot boxes and so on, collecting them as you go and improving those ships that are your mainstay. That's where they're going to make their money. That's what pays for the game. So as you go through and you improve those techs, you open up more of these levels on your skill tree. Now, we didn't have this one here at the end available to us. If we on the ship that we have there, it's had a level 3. We can see that up here. In order to get that higher, we'd have to put more schematics in. Well, we were maxed at level 3, so we had these first few parts of the skill tree open. And as you go along and you improve your level as well within the game, as well as essentially paying to level up this build here, you get more and more points to allocate to these. So leveling up faster is important. That's why we talked earlier about focusing on leveling up 1 or 2 ships to start with. And then what happens when you eventually go into battle? You end up with a battle report. This tells you exactly what's gone on during that battle that you had. You will spend countless hours, if you're really deeply involved in the game, in looking at these various combat reports and logs. A combat, when you're engaged, is automatic. You're not actually directing anything. Everything is worked out preset based on all your various ships, strike craft and officer stats. It sounds complicated. It isn't that complicated when you go into it, but if you really want to get into the detail and find out basically what's working with what, where you're minimizing or maximizing damage and your firepower, then this is the place to look. And generally, as the seasons go on and there are more and more just essentially hardcore players left, they will be the people who have gone through these reports and really kind of worked out what is working and what's not. Fear not, there will be plenty of people out there coming up and telling you what is the best way to kit out a ship, but that is for the future. We're not quite there on that as yet. And so that is me pretty much signing out. I hope you've got something out of this very short video. I'll be putting together a few more at length, I guess, looking at similar games and why they've gone by the wayside. Having probably a deeper dive into some of the things that I'm hoping for to see in the game, and things that might improve player engagement, player retention rates between seasons. And certainly once the game is launched, I'll be actually putting out hopefully some useful tutorials about how to pick up the game, how to start, some of the things you might find a bit difficult. And essentially we'll do probably something along the lines of a half-hour to 1 hour video of essentially my first 24 hours within the game, trying to explain a little bit about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and hopefully that might be of some use to people. So anyway, here we go. Here's the countdown just down here. That's what you get when you actually sign up to warofnova.com. I advise doing it in advance, pre-registering. There are bonuses for doing that. They may be small, but they will be helpful for sure. On top of that, just dive on in there. I would strongly recommend it to anyone who is either interested in Web3 gaming and trying to look for that next big thing, and also to people who, like me, have got a bit disillusioned with some of the other Geo-strat war games that have been out there for a while. It's something to finally get excited about again, having seen a lot of things bomb. Pretty much I'd like to see you there. I mean, let's get in there, let's make this game good, and we'll hope that the developers can keep pace with us all. Thanks for watching.